You think this scares me? You never learned a damn thing about respect." His fist crashed against the table, rattling papers. "Don't raise your voice at me. I'm the one cleaning up your mess," the other man spat, shoulders drawn tight, eyes darting toward the boardroom windows. "Called the IRS yet? Or you just hoping no one notices the loan on page 5? The accusation hovered hot and heavy. "I built this company, you owe me." The words were less than a shout, barely louder than the hum of fluorescent lights. From across the room, a third voice cut through with a rasp. "Board's watching. Maybe shut up before you dig deeper, Jack." Chairs scraped the floor. He glared across the polished table, face flushing, fingers wound tight around a pen that wouldn't stop shaking. "You put my family on the street," he growled, voice low. "You counted on me to forgive, not today. Last chance, step down or I make every single document public." The threat snapped like a whip, echoing against the steel-framed glass. He shoved back his chair. "Try me." Time seemed to stutter, that instant hanging over them all. To understand how anyone could reach this point, you'd have to go back months before the air turned raw with threats and the past called out for payment. Jack Harper stood in the splintering pull-out bed of his borrowed RV, cradling a mug of lukewarm coffee between hands gone red in the morning chill. Gray light seeped in through thin curtains, illuminating the peeling Gadsden flag tacked along one wall. Outside, his life was boxed. Everything he hadn't pawned or lost in foreclosure now piled in plastic bins chained behind the rusted Ford truck. The digital bank statement on his phone glared. $68, and that only if he didn't pay for gas. The night before, Jack's grown son, Derek, had handed him a manila envelope and walked away without looking back. Inside, it had been official. The family home on Hollow Creek tract, 45 windswept acres at the edge of the Oregon Cascades, signed over to Derek as Jack, for the good of the family, agreed to be bought out for a pittance. Jack had read, then reread the terms until the words blurred. All to cover Derek's failing business, a string of outdoor supply stores that had hemorrhaged cash through 2 bad winters. He had buried his wife 2 years earlier. Cancer, bone-deep tiredness, hospital bills that would never die. Since then, it had been just Jack and his sons, Derek and the younger, Ezra. Both grown, both certain they knew more about hard times than the man who lined their pockets every graduation, every ruined car, every missed rent. He took another swallow of coffee, bitter as memory, just as a notification pinged his phone. Oregon Port Authority, auction lot 44, surplus shipping container, winning bid $3, delivery scheduled to the far lot at Hollow Creek. He snorted. "Hell of a joke," he muttered, blinking against the ache behind his eyes. The world had a sense of humor. Jack had just never been in on it. That day, he drove out to Hollow Creek one last time, signed his name where instructed. Derek's lawyer, a man who looked at him like a faintly distasteful stain, shook his hand twice for luck. On the edge of the property, beside the crumbling boundary fence, an old aluminum shipping container jutted from a patch of nettles. "Here's your $3 fortune, Jack," someone called. Chuckles followed. Jack ignored them, wary of how his hands trembled, anger, cold, or just the finality. The container's door was stuck, rust welded along the bottom seam. He frowned, running his finger along the nearest fence post. It wobbled more than it should. A faded set of numbers, several letters, and a date had been etched there decades ago. A child's scrawl or a code. He pried at the cap with his pocket knife, curiosity flaring where shame had pooled. The end cap clattered free, and a wadded, yellowed envelope spilled into his palm. Inside was a brittle blueprint in government tissue blue, dated 1961, and a key stamped with a code he did not recognize. He blinked, heart knocking hard. That was hook one, something nobody had expected, least of all him. If you've ever watched your own blood tie a noose with paper, keep listening. Some roots reach deeper, and so do the secrets tangled in the dark. He wasn't sure what drove him, spite, hope, or just the primal need to do anything but be pitied. But at dusk, Jack found himself jostling the last hollow fence post again, now committed to prying back every bolt and secret the property had to offer. The wind clawed at his flannel, carrying the scent of pine needles and something sharper, metallic. He tugged the entire post until with a jolt it lifted clear of the concrete base. The sound was a hollow thunk, not the heavy scrape he expected. The wind picked up as Jack threaded the key from the blueprint through his fingers and walked the overgrown path leading down to the creek's edge. The property twisted and sprawled. Old gold rush rumors still clung to the moss-crusted rocks, whispered over by crows in the creek's endless mutter. He kept thinking of Molly, her copper hair, her calm. If she were still alive, she'd have told him to trust nothing untouched for 50 years. Flashbacks pressed in around him each step. Derek at 12, arguing about chores, Derek at 30, grinning as he tossed Dad a loan document, Molly's last night, her hand squeezing Jack's wrist, trying to anchor him for what came next. Grief wasn't a wound, it was a second spinal cord. The creek spat mist as he reached the narrow footbridge, every board creaking half-rotten. Beyond the far bank, out past the fenced-off orchard, the very last post was barely visible. Jack probed along the base, fingers scraping through damp loam until they found a metal ring recessed into soft earth. He pulled, the trapdoor lifted, wood groaning as if voicing a half-forgotten warning. Inside was a void that tasted of minerals, dark-smelling and cold. The blueprint's dimensions matched the entrance exactly. This had been engineered. He exhaled, nerves straining, as he flicked the beam of his battered flashlight down a rickety set of steps. He started down and the air shifted, a place made to be forgotten. This was Hook 2. The steps creaked under his boots as Jack descended, breath shallow above cold stone. The smell hit him first, an underground current like ozone and old secrets. His light played along walls clad in military-issue tin, staggered shelves bolted into stone, lines of weathered boxes marked with serial numbers. A desk sat square against the far wall, papers scattered, dust layered thick, but the shape of a government-issue badge shone where his light struck. He picked up a battered notebook labeled Witness Log, May 1, 1962. The handwriting was cramped, official. He cracked it open, hands shaking and words spilled into his lap. Names, code phrases, notations about package transfer verified by Captain Reddick, Hollow Creek site. Jack read slowly, lips parting as he reached the final entries. Exchange took place as planned. No civilian presence. This property to remain secret per federal directive, useful as fallback in case of escalation. Contaminant containment system confirmed operational, full capacity, March 1962 installation complete. The technical diagrams were tacked like afterthoughts to the next page, an elaborate filtration system, its pipes routing water from a deep spring, screens, and a reservoir. Something about it seemed modern, even revolutionary. He sat back, light trembling, mind ablaze. Then a slip of folded stationery caught his eye separate from the official record, stamped only with a wobbly J in fountain pen. He flicked it open. Jack, if you're reading this, you've inherited a problem as old as the hills. Don't trust Derek. He's in knee-deep with folks that'll pull the rug out fast. This land's not just dirt. There's a system down here that saved Hollow Creek for decades. I built it to keep us safe. You find the key, don't let it leave the family. It's worth more than you know. Uncle Walt. That last sentence sent Jack's hands numb. Uncle Walt had died before Jack turned 12. A legend even in memory, the one Harper who'd left war and shadowy projects for Oregon's Green Drift. Now, as the dust motes circled, Jack looked up into half-dark, thoughts galloping. He nearly missed a Polaroid tucked under the log. Derek, standing in this very room only weeks earlier, flashlight beam cutting through the haze. Jack's throat closed, a burst of anger stealing his breath. Derek had known about this maybe for months. A shuffle above, boots on loose earth. Jack killed his flashlight, shadows pressing in. Outside, a car idled on the far bank, its headlights stabbing at the tangled undergrowth. Jack stashed the logbook, keys clenched hard. Above, someone kicked the trapdoor closed with a sharp bang. In the hush that followed, something shifted. The mystery wasn't just old, it was alive and watching. Jack set his jaw. He crawled from the bunker hours later, lungs burning, chest scraped. The dawn was bruising the tree line as he made his way to the nearest working cell tower in town, logbook in his pack. He dialed, breath-sawing. "Tina, it's Jack Harper. You busy today?" "Took you long enough?" Tina's voice crackled, part humor, part relief. Tina had been Molly's school friend, a by-the-books government compliance officer who kept half of Clatsop County from jail by technical oversight alone. He trusted her more than most. He slid into the booth of the White Stag Diner where she waited, her coffee steaming beside a Smithsonian magazine. Jack placed the log and blueprint on the plastic table. She skimmed quickly, brow nodding. "You realize what this is?" Her voice dropped, syllables sharp as the clink of her spoon. "Enlighten me, preferably fast." Jack kept his hands still, noting the hush in the diners around them. "Cold War fallback site, Jack. Do you have any idea?" She stopped, searching his face for patience she wasn't sure she'd find. "If what this says is true, the government will pay 6-7 figures for the land and the water rights plus the containment tech. It's the sort of thing historical societies fight over. If you file for preservation, you can force their hand." He grunted. "Only thing I don't got is time." He pointed at the paperwork. "They gave me 45 days to register before title passes, then it's all Derek's. He'll flip it to cover his debt before I even finish this cup." Tina tapped her lip. 45 days, I know a judge, but you'll need proof Derek falsified the transfer, otherwise retroactive claims won't stick." Jack watched her. In school, Tina had boxed out bullies twice her size by writing teachers' notes convincing enough to stop cafeteria riots. He trusted her to see the cracks. "So we begin," his voice was soft. Tina smiled, the gleam of an old co-conspirator flickering to life. "We begin." They worked in bursts, Tina pulling real estate records, Jack tracking footprints on the land, making calls to agencies so shadowed most calls were routed through security clearances. The obstacles multiplied. 1 week in, the title company called. Derek had filed to sell the tract piecemeal, gold rush style, looking for a quick payback before his creditors caught up. Jack nearly smashed his phone. The anger, so long frozen inside, found heat as betrayal tracked through his veins. He'd known his son was desperate. He hadn't known he'd stoop to legal arson. He decided to confront Derek directly. The sight of the showdown, Derek's store, a half-empty shell propped by sale signs and the faint odor of mildew. He cornered Derek near the supply racks, clipped sentences traded across rows of battered crates. "You ever plan to tell me about the bunker?" Jack asked, voice low. Derek bristled. "You weren't using it. You never understood the value." Jack pressed harder. "I wasn't using it, so it's forfeit. Since when did blood mean nothing?" Derek's lips pulled tight. "I had no choice, Dad. I'm drowning." Jack's restraint snapped. "You put me and Ezra out for your debt." Derek's answer was a whisper. "I thought you'd de-bounce back. You always do." The admission chafed. Jack left, the ground under his boots suddenly less stable, his own son, the one he'd hauled up from Rivers, now willing to let him sink. The next morning, Jack's phone vibrated. "Tina again." "Paperwork's a mess, Jack." Derek funneled title through a shell company backed by half his board. "He's burning through cash faster than the IRS can blink. If that news breaks, every share he owns gets flagged, government comes calling for back taxes, liens, maybe criminal charges." He shivered as he realized the picture. It wasn't just Derek, but a network. If the right people learned about the water system below Hollow Creek, it'd be scorched earth for all of them. Tina continued, "File an emergency complaint and you might stall. But you need allies fast, other shareholders, anyone not in on the scam. And Jack, don't underestimate revenge. They won't go quietly." The machine was in motion now, every gear grinding. For the next 2 weeks, Jack called, wrote, hunted down old employees, neighbors, even some of the construction crew who'd repaired the fencing. Each night, he crashed in the RV, moonlight painting the ceiling, Molly's old quilt tucked under his chin like an apology. On one such night, just as the wind outside moaned against the tin roof, someone rapped sharp and desperate at the RV's door. It was Ezra, ragged, his jaw bruised. Derek sent his goons, they trashed my place, I had to run. He sobbed once, then straightened, fire in his eyes. Jack hesitated, then gestured him in. Together they huddled, voices trembling but determined. The truth was out, Derek would stop at nothing now. They hatched a plan. Jack would approach the shareholders as a whistleblower, armed with evidence of the shell company scheme and the government obligation tied to the property. He'd use the blueprint, the witness log, and the filter tech as leverage. If he could get enough votes, Derek could be removed as CEO, triggering an IRS audit that would unravel the whole thing. Ezra's role, I'll get word to the right networks. Message boards, whistleblower tips, they'll listen. People hate thieves even if it's their own. That night they set to work, Ezra charting digital forensics, Jack gathering the rest of the physical documents from the hollow posts and the bunker below. Each square of paper felt like a stone being set in place, each a weight, but also a step toward something like justice. When the board meeting day arrived, Jack put on his only suit, running a hand through hair he hadn't cut since Molly's funeral. He carried the battered notebook, papers in a folder so thick its edges curled. Tina met him outside the converted barn that now served as company headquarters. "Ready?" she asked, her tone somewhere between a dare and a eulogy. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replied, voice dry. Inside, the boardroom glimmered with the hard sheen of money, not the kind Jack had ever gotten used to, but the sort that turned friends into opportunists and children into creditors. He walked in, each step deliberate, the hush in the room thickening as eyes fell on him. Derek sat near the head of the table, dark circles rimmed beneath his eyes, jaw ticking in time with his nerves. "Dad, didn't expect to see you here," Derek smirked, but the words tripped over a lump in his throat. "Jack didn't wait, I've got documents. Proof you falsified transfer of Hollow Creek using an illegal shell company. Government logs, blueprints. IRS is interested." Murmurs bubbled among the board, phones flicking up to record. Derek's tone sharpened, desperation threading through bravado. "You're bluffing." Tina intervened, voice professional. "We've confirmed the system under Hollow Creek is registered as an emergency Cold War installation. Federal jurisdiction applies. If this isn't reported to the IRS and proper authorities, the company is exposed to criminal and civil liability." A board member, Mrs. Turnbull, spat, "Derek, you signed personal guarantees for company debt. If this land reverts or the IRS applies liens." Derek exploded, "My father signed off. I did what I had to so the company survives. I am the only one who's built anything." Jack shook his head, shoulders slumping for the first time. "You built on sand, Derek. You left your family for a dying empire." The mood burst, stockholders urged for a vote. One man, lips tight, said, "We move for emergency removal of the CEO and immediate notification of authorities." Ezra swept in, backup in tow, printouts, a USB drive, a list of fraudulent wire transfers. He tossed the drive to Tina. "Everything points to him. Clean or crumble, Derek, your call." Tension drew the room taut like a fence wire before snap. Derek's eyes flitted, hands trembling, sweat trickling at his temple. The board began voting, hands raised, eyes locked on the spectacle. "Don't raise your voice at me. I'm the one cleaning up your mess," Derek barked, spittle flecking the tabletop at board members' glares. Jack clenched his fist, knuckles whitening, thunder in his voice. "Called the IRS yet, or just hoping no one notices the loan on page 5. Chairs scraped as the mood flipped from corporate to courtroom. No one wanted a share of the fallout. "I built this company, you owe me," Derek pleaded. From the right, Mrs. Turnbull snapped, "Board's watching. Maybe shut up before you dig deeper, Derek." Jack's pen tapped the folder, barely masking the tremor in his hand. "You put my family on the street," Jack growled. "You counted on me to forgive, not today. Last chance, step down or I make every single document public." The words echoed, biting through the room's icy silence. Derek hesitated, eyes darting, sweat lining his brow. He shoved his chair away from the table. "Try me." An IRS agent in the back, the local regional director, summoned by Tina's preemptive complaint, rose. "We have jurisdiction. Mr. Harper, your testimony matches supporting documentation. Mr. Derek Harper, you are subject to immediate audit and your compensation is frozen pending outcome. Any obstruction will be treated as criminal." The board fell into chaos. Derek lunged for Jack, hands shaking, rage splintered into heartbreak. Jack held his ground, fatigue burning deep, but this time finally unbroken. Outside the boardroom, news crews already clustered. The story broke by noon, headlines blazing. Oregon CEO removed in Cold War land scandal. IRS launches emergency audit. When it was done, Derek was escorted from the building, wrists unbound but prospects mangled. Penalties alone would bankrupt him, every asset frozen, the house he stole from his father now on the auction block, the company shares rendered worthless by tax liens and community outrage. The members of the community board, former employees, kin, gathered around Jack in the lot. Tina hugged him tightly. Ezra simply leaned against the battered truck, head bowed in relief. "You did it, Dad," Ezra said, voice trembling. Jack could only exhale, the weight finally letting up, the horizon clearing. In the months that followed, Derek lost everything. First the stores, then his vehicles, next the downtown office, gone to court-ordered auctions and creditors circling like the wolves of Jack's nightmares. The IRS pulled no punches. $124,000 in back taxes and penalties, liens on his few remaining personal assets, public disgrace. The company board rebuilt. The Cold War water system at Hollow Creek was re-engineered into a clean water demo site, managed as a historical and technical wonder. The government paid an honest price for the rights, enough to settle the last 2 years' debt and then some. News of the Harper affair rippled through Clatsop County and far beyond, how betrayal crumbled, how the oldest wounds could still be salved, how truth and grit outlasted all the double talk. Jack, for the first time in years, slept through the night. He became the quiet pillar that others leaned on, mentoring forlorn sons, daughters, orphans who'd lost not just inheritance but hope. He told them that family isn't shelter unless you fight for the roof. In the evenings, when the sky blazed gold and blue behind the ridgelines, he'd walk the property with Ezra and Tina, boots sinking into old gold rush soil, laughter echoing among the pines. The wounds healed, if not perfectly, then honestly, like tree rings closing over scars. The worth of a man was measured not by what he kept, but by what he handed forward when everything else was stripped away. If you've carried the weight of betrayal yet chose to build instead of break, this one is for you. The longest shadows are only cast by something standing tall. And as Hollow Creek's clear water finally flowed to the town below, what began in bitterness turned to something sharper, something that could cut through the worst of history, forging one last, unbreakable bond. Jack never sought applause, but in the spring there came a day when the town itself seemed to circle back and say thank you. Hollow Creek, once a secret, now drew students, news crews, engineers in blue windbreakers clutching notepads, school kids who skipped stones in the chill shallows spilling from the edge of the Harper land. There was a ceremony, simple, unadorned. Jack felt awkward in the front row as local officials praised the unexpected heroism and stewardship that had saved not only a relic of Cold War history, but the drinking water for half the valley. Tina squeezed his hand, grinning at the rough patches on his knuckles. "There's talking of naming the site after you," she teased, loud enough for the mayor to overhear. "Imagine that, Jack Harper Reservoir." He snorted, shaking his head. "I'd settle for keeping my boots dry another week, Tina." He caught Ezra's eye across the crowd, a tired grin ghosting between them. If pride was a burden, it was at least lighter than shame. Afterward, Jack lingered at the waterline while the others drifted toward the tables stacked with sandwiches and lemonade. Ezra joined him, hands stuffed deep into his jeans. "Feels weird," Ezra said, towing a smooth pebble. "All those people talking about us like we're some kind of legacy." "I never cared much for legacy," Jack grunted. "Just wanted the fighting to stop. The land, well, your mother loved it, that's reason enough for me." Ezra's voice softened. "I owe you for sticking around when I didn't deserve it." Jack looked at his son, eyes ringed, hair unkempt but steadier somehow. "Nothing to owe, Ezra. Family's not a ledger, you learned that, you got more than money in the bank." The wind rustled the long grass, the creek a steady hush beside them. For a moment there was no bitterness, only what remained after the storm had spent itself. Behind them, Tina approached, carrying 3 lemonades. She passed them out with the air of a drill sergeant on leave. "Think you boys can behave for one afternoon, or do I need to sit between you?" Jack managed a smile. "We're old dogs, Tina, all bite, no bark." Ezra coughed to hide a laugh, splashing some lemonade on the toe of his boot. "Maybe let's not test that. I've seen how you drive a riding mower, Dad." The afternoon sunlight turned everything gentle and bright, and for once Jack allowed himself to believe it would stay that way. Weeks passed, Derek's calls came less and less, thin and threadbare. The first time, Jack let it ring through to voicemail. The second he listened, Derek hollow-voiced, almost apologetic. "Dad, I know I can't fix what I did, I'm sorry, I lost everything. I shouldn't be asking for anything, but I don't know where else to go." Jack left the phone in his pocket that day, the apology gnawing and restless in his chest. One evening, as the light broke into rain at the kitchen window, he heard himself dialing Derek back. When the line picked up, it was a hush, then a ragged breath. "I can't give you money," Jack said, words plain, "but if you want to come help at Hollow Creek, there's work that needs doing. No shortcuts, just work." He heard Derek swallow, fighting for old pride and nearly losing. "I'd like that. I thanks, Dad." It wasn't forgiveness, or at least not the kind television stories sell. It was just enough not to be lost. By midsummer, the property felt lived in again. Tina's car was as common as Jack's battered truck, and sometimes Ezra brought friends. Grad students, local kids, anyone curious or desperate for a break from the town's endless cycle of gossip and industry. One July morning, Jack came upon Derek perched at the edge of the creek, legs dangling over a plank. He was scrubbing algae from the edge of the filtration inlet, his hair damp with sweat. "Been here since sunup," Jack called out. Derek nodded, not looking up. "Guess I've got a lot to make up for." Jack sat beside him, the air sharp with mint and wild onion. "You know, your uncle built this whole system by hand. No manuals, just grit. He always thought the hardest thing was keeping it secret. I think he was wrong. The hardest thing's keeping something alive when you don't feel like you deserve it anymore." Derek winced. Jack could see the words sting. "I messed up. All I can do is try to help." "That's all I'm asking," Jack said, soft now. "Just do the work." They lapsed into silence, only the flick and rattle of moving water between them. The day stretched, and with it, something less jagged grew, maybe not trust, but at least truce. As fall painted the maples scarlet, the first school trip visited Hollow Creek as a historical site. Tina was in her element, holding forth about the intricacies of Cold War engineering, signing off on visitor badges, and arguing with the county liaison about liability releases. Jack walked the lines with a handful of 6th graders, telling stories, well, the ones that could be told from his own boyhood among the trees. One student, a quiet girl with ink-stained fingers, asked, "Did you always want to own this place?" Jack smiled, remembering for a moment the dreams he'd buried and the ones he'd inherited. "No, but sometimes a place chooses you, and the best you can do is take care of it till the next person comes along." She nodded as if this were an answer that made the world spin straighter. That evening, over stew and bread, the old kitchen felt full again. Tina told a story about nearly getting fired for shutting down a county contract over a misfiled permit. Ezra argued baseball with Derek, voices overlapping, the sting of old fights fading with every meal. Jack sat back studying them, his family as it could be. He felt the ache of Molly's absence and the warmth of her legacy threading through the laughter. Outside, the stars pressed low to the horizon, bright as fire on snow. He raised a glass, just lemonade, but it would do, to the roof over our heads and all the work under it. The others joined in, Tina grinning, Derek hesitating before finally tossing back his glass in salute. "Home," Ezra said, the word ringing as true as anything that night. Later, after the table was cleared and the windows closed, Jack wandered down to the bunker's entrance at the edge of the wood. He ran his palm over the numbered post, the scars and carvings like a family record no ledger could hold. History, he thought, was not just what survived, but what you chose to tend when every other line broke. He breathed in the night, creek song earth, the faint tang of the Cold War steel below his boots. Someday, he knew, even this story would grow faint, a rumor folded into county history, half disbelieved. But he'd seen the strength it took to admit fault, to begin again, to choose the honest work every morning. Jack turned back to the house, warm against the fall night, and went in by the side door. Tomorrow would bring its own load, but tonight the ledger was clean. The land was safe, the family pieced back, and his heart, surprisingly, felt light. If you have carried regret down long years but found one honest harvest at the end, a patch of earth, a stubborn hope, the chance to mend what you could, then you know what it means to come home and to stay. The first frost came quietly, crisping the last of the garden and dusting the ridgelines gray, but inside Hollow Creek's old house warmth held. Jack woke early as always, habit never quite yielding, brewed strong coffee and let the wood stove crackle fierce against the dawn chill. Light found Ezra already dressed, boots muddy, Derek, still awkward in the old barn jacket, hauled split logs in from the shed. Tina's laugh spilled from the kitchen, sharper than the clank of mugs. The house had settled into a rhythm Jack thought he'd never see again, a handful of second chances, stitched together with chores, forgiveness, and work that started at sunrise. He found Ezra at the edge of the yard, tracing a new boundary line for a walking path. "How many feet do you think to the creek?" Ezra asked, holding the surveyor's tape taut. 54, Jack replied, not needing a measure. "Walked it 1,000 times since I was your age." Derek shuffled over, hands jammed in his pockets. "I could dig out the posts this weekend, or, if you want, I'll take care of the orchard instead." Ezra looked to Jack, old habits, old roles. Jack let the pause settle. "Do both," he said, the hint of a smile pulling at the edge of his mouth. "Hard work never killed a harper yet." Derek's grin came, small but steady, "On it." Later that day, as the sun burned off the last of the frost, the four of them met by the springhead. Tina spread maps across a folding table, eyes bright as she plotted goals for the preservation fund, the school visits, the restoration grants already trickling in. She looked up at Jack. "You know, people keep calling you a hero. The papers want another interview. They're talking documentaries. Jack, wanna put your face on a bronze plaque by the creek." Jack snorted. "Let Em interview Tina. She's the one with the answers. I just carried the toolbox." Tina rolled her eyes. "You carried us all farther than you'll ever admit." Ezra nudged Derek, whispering just loud enough, "Told you he'd hate the statue." Derek's answering chuckle was the first real laughter Jack had heard from him in a year, something loose, almost young again. They spent that afternoon sawing bramble, hauling scrap, and repairing fence. By suppertime, exhaustion looped them together at the old table. Ezra lit candles, Derek ladled stew, Tina poured drinks. Through the window, the last of autumn's gold spilled over Hollow Creek, bright and cold and new. Jack raised his mug, voice rough but clear, to holding onto what matters and to letting go of the rest. They drank, no speeches, just the knowing silence of those who have lost and then chosen each other again. Outside, the night grew long and quiet. Inside there was laughter, the hush of old wounds healing, and the sturdy, ceaseless work of family. This at last was home,